Well, hello everybody and welcome to Open House Melbourne, Melbourne Connect's presentation about what it means to build an innovation precinct. Welcome all, and welcome to this virtual webinar we've had to do as a result of the latest trials and tribulations of COVID. Well, I can't see you all at the moment, but hopefully you can see me. I'll do a few introductions. My name is Tim Bright. I'm the Events and Activations Manager here at Melbourne Connect. And it's lovely to see all you folks coming through on the list of attendees here. And we're very glad to have you all. So how today's session is going to work is thus. I'm going to give you a quick introduction and agenda for today's meeting while people are still sort of tuning in and getting settled. Hopefully you can see the Q&A button down the bottom of your screen there, and you're welcome to ask questions at any time. If they're questions that I can answer while the session is going on, I might write you a reply and you'll get that reply. If they're questions for our esteemed guests, then we'll make those public and we'll address them at the Q&A session in about 45 minutes time. So that's what we're going to do. It's as simple as that. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague and boss, Phil Callahan, who's going to join us. He's the Director of Melbourne Connect. Phil would like to give us an acknowledgement of country, or the countries that we're on today, give a bit of background to Melbourne Connect, and eventually introduce our special guests for today. So hi, Phil. Welcome to the session, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Tim, and good morning, everybody. My name is Phil Callahan, Director of Operations here with the University of Melbourne at Melbourne Connect. It's with great pleasure and enormous pride that on behalf of the university and our partners in this venture, Lendlease, and it's the consortium led by Lendlease, that I welcome you all here today in the celebration of Melbourne Connect, the innovation precinct, and in particular speaking to its design. I'd walked past through Carlton, the precinct building site, for about 2 years prior to it opening. And I watched this extraordinary building erupt from the ground, and the building attracted me, its design, the concept attracted me, and its objectives attracted me. To build a place celebrating the power of collaboration and the power of place bringing people together. This was to be a co-location, a next event horizon of research, bringing together cutting-edge industry partners, governments, social sector, investors, student talent, artists, startups, scale-up businesses, and all shades of the entrepreneurial community, all coming together with the objective of taking the best of new ideas and translating them into positive societal impact. What an inspirational idea, and what a wonderful 74,000 square metre reality that has become now. But first things first, and first peoples first, we acknowledge the First Nations peoples at the centre, at the very heart of this place, and its spirit of innovation, exploration and art. So we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation. These are our first designers, innovators, engineers and artists. The university acquired the former Royal Women's site from the state government in 2012, and planning and consultation followed through to commencement of works in 2018. And happily, we got practical completion in March this year. Since then, we've had our partners, both university and commercial co-located partners, move in, and we've become the focus for festivals. We host an annual Melbourne Connect Innovation Festival on site and digital, and that commences very shortly in August 13th to 19th. Check it out. And of course, we're thrilled now to be a partner with the Centre for Architecture Victoria and Open House Melbourne. Very proud to be so. There are also so many important partners in bringing this phenomenal construct to life, and some do need to be mentioned. Woods Bagot, Master Planners, Architectus, Interior Design for CLT Building, Hazel, Student Accommodation, Aspect, Laneways and Landscape, Hazel for the Engineering Faculty Interior Design, and Arab, our Sustainability Advisors. Thank you all, and we celebrate together our combined achievements. We've got the unique opportunity to hear in detail today from Woods Bagot colleagues on some of the intricacies through and to the design that goes into the making of a dynamic, successful city landmark precinct that Melbourne Connect is today. I'm going to hand you over to our hosts for today, Hazel Porter, Principal Design Architect, and Alastair Flynn, Senior Associate Project Architect. Thanks and enjoy.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Tim. Hi, I'm Hazel Porter. I'm an architect, a design architect with the Melbourne studio of Woods Bagot. I'm a principal, and with Alastair Flynn, who's also on the call. Al, I don't know if you want to wave and say hi.
Hi, everyone.
We've been on the journey with Lend-Lease and the University of Melbourne for a little while now. And if you're not familiar with the project itself, this is where we'd rather be on this beautiful sunny day. It's on the corner of, actually it's a city block, if we're honest. It's a city block bounding Swanson, Grattan and Cardigan Street in Carlton. So we'd love to talk to you about the design of an innovation precinct today. So Alastair and myself, and along with just a few of our colleagues, and this is really just touching the tip of the iceberg here, all of these faces in Woods Bagot have been along for the journey, starting in 2016, and this was a design competition. We teamed up with Lend-Lease and went through an amazingly rigorous and really fun, challenging few months to bring our vision to the university, and thankfully that's what we've been able to deliver with all of our partners here along the way. And again, there are many, many other people who have contributed to what is on site now. These are just a few. So in opening, what is an innovation precinct? We're going to talk to you about how we designed it and how we approached it. We might leave it up to our clients to tell you how it actually started and what the ambitions were.
I think everything we know about innovation tells us that place is really important. I mean, you've only got to go to places like Silicon Valley, you've got to see the booming co-working spaces around the world, and it tells us that there's something about the environment in which you work that makes a really big difference.
There is no doubt that we're facing some really big challenges on a societal level. And so putting together great minds, rising talent and co-locating them next to each other so that they bump into each other and start to think through problems in different ways, I think we've got a real chance at solving some of those problems.
All of our lives are going to be touched by digital transformations, from artificial intelligence to big data to automation. I believe we'll look back in 50 years' time and see a lot of those innovations starting at Melbourne Connect.
I think the superfloor at Melbourne Connect is really one of the most exciting ideas in the whole development. It's a great place for people who work there to collaborate, but as importantly, with the science gallery right in the corner, it actually gives the community access to the university.
So that's just a little bit from our clients. And as you can probably appreciate, there were a fair amount of stakeholders in the process. So just to give you a little bit of context there, our brief was quite complex as well. So here we are on the university campus just outside. A lot of you will be familiar with the former Royal Women's Hospital site. So there was a process that was undertaken to see if we could repurpose this particular building, and unfortunately it just didn't quite make the grade. So the adaptive reuse, we actually made some really great reclamation of the bricks and a few of the surgical lights and some of the interior wayfinding signage and a realm of other bits and pieces from this building that actually make their way into the new building. So with that respect in mind, and obviously with the respect of the traditional owners, we actually started to understand how to bring everything together. So we call it an innovation ecology, because it is quite a number of things that need to come together and actually have a collaborative connection in the physical realm to make Melbourne Connect work. So you already heard a little bit about the superfloor. The School of Engineering has its academic workplace as part of this. The industry partners are a really important part of it. Having the residential accommodation on site for those visiting academics, and Hazel made the architecture for that one. Making the open space in the middle really orchestrate how all of the design was set up in and around it. There's a fab lab, there's obviously some retail and cafes, there's end of trip facilities, and on the corner, addressing the street with the big hero view, is the science gallery. So the design principles that we really adhered to were the things we kept coming back to make sure that we were addressing the right things and make sure that the design was meeting the ambitions of everybody involved. So I just showed you a picture of the old hospital. And as I said, trying to repurpose that building wasn't really going to give us the right manifestation of all of the ambitions on site. The middle building itself, very skinny, not necessarily fit for purpose for what it needed to become. And then with the accommodation that we needed to put onto the site, additional buildings, it wasn't really getting there. So what we understood about the site, and I mentioned the size of it previously, was that we actually wanted to draw everybody in on ground plane and make it accessible to everybody. So we devised this series of narratives around how we might do that. So if you're turning the building horizontal, we need to be able to bring some light into it, and then we want to bring the people back into it. So we start to carve into that space. And metaphorically, we put all of that beautiful ground plane activation and vistas that you can always see through from one corner to the next. And what we did was also just look at the way that people move through the university campus as well, and all those shortcuts and walking in and around the quad building and going from class to class. And we wanted to have that sense of ant trail about this precinct as well. And so we then started to break down the scale of what we knew needed to be a fairly significant site and massing. All of that combined, and I'll jump in if you want to talk to some of these really fantastic ESD initiatives that we achieved on site.
Sure, I can talk through some of this now, Hazel.
Yeah.
So I saw one of the first questions in the Q&A was about the ESD initiatives on the site, and there were a few baked into the brief, which was great, a great place to start. So the precinct is 6-star Green Star certified, designed and as built, and has those neighbours energy and water ratings as well. Another really important ESD feature is the 10% of renewables. So the on-site 10% of the on-site energy needs to be generated by on-site renewables, and it's not visible when you're standing on the ground plane on site, but the roof is festooned with solar panels. So we almost had to add more roof to add more solar panels to it. So every square inch of roof space has a solar panel on it. We're getting almost 10% from that, and we're getting a little bit more from geothermal energy in the piles in the basement. So it's not visible, but that's a really important part of the ESD strategy. We've also got end of trip facilities. So there's capacity for 380 bikes on site with showers, lockers, change rooms, etc. And we'll get to the mass timber in a second, but one of the buildings on site has mass timber structure, which is also a significant contributor to the ESD strategy. Back to you, Hazel.
So just some construction shots, and this just gives you a bit of an idea about the vastness of the PV cells that actually went up onto the roof during construction. And this is the smaller, I should say, CLT building that Alastair was just talking about. a little bit of an overview just in some drone footage here that we'll share with you, just because we can't actually be on site. So just jumping back down to the ground, we'd love to show you through the way that the site itself is built up, because as I mentioned, it is a very complex set of program and stakeholders that need to be accommodated on the site. So it kind of required quite a robust and quite efficient way of squeezing everything in. So as I mentioned, we looked at these shortcuts, and we actually had a 4-metre fall across the site from east to west down to the corner at Swanson and Grattan Street. So what we wanted to do was make it accessible to everybody. So we set ourselves that design challenge from the outset, is that we didn't want any stairs inhibiting anybody the ability to walk through the site at any time. So part of that gathering space and the round central open space, that was a really key part of setting up the geometry to allow that. And I'm very pleased to say we'd actually did achieve that. So on the ground plane, sort of harking back to the diagram where we lifted up all of that program and tried to make it as transparent as possible. The science gallery on the corner and the entrance up into the School of Engineering, very transparent with huge big windows. And that's very much about making accessible visually as well as physically everything that's going on in the precinct, and creating these little network of laneways that weave their way through the site. The superfloor is a really interesting space. It's huge. And the premise of that was to connect all of the program and connect all of the buildings across this single floor that would act, and we like to describe it as a bit of a crossover between a library and a Qantas club. So there are certain amount of bookable spaces in there. There's a variety of sort of activated spaces. So you could have quiet zones, there's the launching pad, there's display spaces, there's collaborative spaces. There's also a kiosk that just this week was finished that you can go and grab a coffee as well. The CLT building houses the MAP, the Melbourne Accelerator Program, and Tim's office as well. So that's a beautiful little building with a gorgeous experience of that timber and the smell of it inside as well. The student accommodation building, a residential / student accommodation, as I mentioned, for visiting academics as well as students, and then bringing it all together with the university and their academic workplace and the industry partners, bringing all of that together, and then for us as architects, understanding how we actually start to mass that up and being very cognizant that it is a big building on a very prominent corner, and how we start to break down that mass. So introducing these carved areas through the verticality of the building, we did that quite deliberately to signify where you can actually enter into the site, so that from afar, the building does look like a series of buildings, and it signifies as you get closer where the entrances are, either to an internal space or to one of the laneways. And the ant farm unpacked and sliced and diced, you can see how we're really using the vertical as well as the horizontal connections. And when we come to the massing in the site, and you can start to see some of the detail as we move into each one of those particular programs and where they sit within the site, and all of the things that go into making each moment as you walk through the site a little bit different. And if we were there today, we'd be talking to you about, say, for instance, walking through from the corner of Swanston and Grattan, and the journey and the brickwork it's got an abstracted image of the Melbourne skyline transposed into the brickwork detailing. We'll show you a little bit more about the brickwork detailing, and the layer of planting and landscaping, that aspect, and ourselves also. We went to great lengths to make sure that we were understanding the importance of not just the hospital site, which is drawn out in the 3AW wing, and transposing the footprint of the old building in the actual bricks from the old building, but also overlaying and really embedding the Indigenous story to bring to life everything that we're really hoping is successful once you all get to go and see it. The plant's a little bit juvenile at the moment, but this is the finished product as it is a few weeks ago on a lovely cold rainy day. The timbers, the plantings are all quite significant, and looking up through that particular space, you can start to understand how the geometry of the superfloor really works to knit together each one of the buildings. And that's a view that we were very cognizant of experiencing from within the open space in the middle, as well as being able to experience that from the inside looking out as well. Some more shots from a couple of weeks ago. And this is the superfloor. So the superfloor, as I mentioned, it's got a heap of different types of spaces, conferencing. It recently held the Melbourne Knowledge Week, and it was fantastic to see everybody in that space, really doing what it was designed to be doing. It was young people with startups and industry leaders who were there to help support and bring some of those ideas and business ventures to life. So some of our ambitions around what we imagined this superfloor experience would be. These are the renders. This is the reality. And we actually think it's worked out better. It's always really interesting to try and capture what the ambition is in a render and then bring it to life through a very obviously long building process, but this one, the warmth of the space is something that was difficult for us to imagine, and it really has come to life being there now. Again, some renders, mostly because we haven't been able to get back in here as part of a big event and show you some of those photos. This is inside, so some beautiful timber detailing, a lot of the rawness of the concrete in the columns coming through into the interior spaces as well. The typical floor plate up through the larger of the tower, we split the core into two so that the experience of arriving from the lifts and walking across into either one of the wings of the floor plate. You can see the dotted area through the middle here is always replicated on each floor so that you're aware of where that laneway is bringing you through the site. And that was quite deliberate. Again, it's used as an orientation device. Alastair will take you through a little bit more on the mass timber structure building.
Sure. So I'll talk to this now. It's worth also adding to some of the points Hazel was made about the space is that we can't all be there at the moment. It's why there's 160 of us on this call, but when lockdown restrictions are lifted in Melbourne, the external space and the superfloor are effectively public spaces. The external space is public 24 hours a day. There's no gates on it, so you can walk in and have a look. The superfloor is similar in a way. Yeah, obviously you have to COVID check in, but I would encourage everyone who's interested to walk through the space. So it's a piece of public architecture, and you can go in and experience what we're talking about. So I'll talk for a few minutes about the mass timber building. During construction, we referred to this as a COT building. It's now called the Innovation Hub, I suppose. It houses the Melbourne Accelerator program and also houses childcare on the top 2 levels and the rooftop. It's a 7-story, yeah, perfect. So these are some of the renders we did during the design phases. And if you flick to the next slide, Hazel, we'll see a photograph. So this is as it looked about a month ago on a bit of a pretty cold day in Melbourne winter. If you flick to the next slide, Hazel, as well. So this is this is perfect. So in the top left-hand corner, there it is. You can see the timber slab actually. So the L-shaped building is the Faculty of Engineering and IT, as well as everything else, which is a really big 4-plate, about 3,200 square metres. The COT building, the timber building, has a 4-plate of about 700 square metres. So it's a baby in comparison. And student accom building you can see on the right-hand side of the slide. So maybe next slide, Hazel. So the timber building is from ground level up. It sits over 2 levels of basement, which are conventional concrete structure. But from ground level up, it's constructed from massive timber, glue laminated columns and cross-laminated timber slabs, columns and beams. So, and the 2 cores are concrete. And I think, I could be wrong, Hazel, but I think this might be one of the tallest timber buildings in Victoria that's been built so far. So
Yes.
far, I'm correct.
Yes.
We're hoping for a few more. And this was like Hazel said, a 4-year journey for us. We started this in 2016 and pushed this and completed in 2021. So it was a long journey to get this over the line, especially the timber aspect. I'll talk through some of the benefits of timber construction and the application in this project. So there's an experiential aspect, which is one of the most important things for us as architects, is that when you're in the space, it really feels different to a space with steel or concrete structure. You can really feel the timber, the warmth that you get from the timber, and particularly when it's under construction, the smell and the feeling of the space is really fantastic. And we think it does have a positive impact on occupants. Obviously, environmental impact is a big one. Wood is 100% renewable and a carbon sequestering resource. Mass timber is low VOC and offcuts become fuel, so it's a very green way to build a building. Next slide, Hazel. So building safety and performance, timber structures, fire resistant, seismically resilient. In terms of mass timber construction, there's been a lot of testing, fire testing and structural testing done by contractors and manufacturers to prove that mass timber will work, and it does perform. Next slide, Hazel. So site safety, this is another big one for contractors, is that when you're on site, it doesn't require traditional formwork and screens. If anyone on the call has been on site and seen people building formwork for concrete, tying Rio or pouring concrete, it's a really labour intensive and site intensive process. People, a crew of guys pouring concrete, there'll be 10 guys standing in about 20 square metres. There's really a lot of work. Timber structure is much different. There's much less high risk work, much less work near live edges. There's no minimal site welding. There's much less site labour required. So there's a lot less noise and dust. So it's has less impact on neighbours. Next slide, Hazel. Another great one is speed of construction. So these couple of shots taken on site with one of the Lendlease team. The app that she's holding on her phone is an app where the timber manufacturers, who in this case were both based in Europe, they build everything in a factory in Europe, ship everything in containers to Australia. I should also add that there's a burgeoning mass timber industry in Australia. We're hoping the next building we do with mass timber will be sourced from Australian hardwoods. This one wasn't. The app they give you tells you where each piece of timber goes. It's a bit like an IKEA diagram, really. And the guys on site with a crane look at the app and they scan the barcode on the CLT slab, which you can see on the right-hand side, and then they kind of know where to put it. So it's really very straightforward and easy way of construction. sorry, Hazel Porter, there was a couple of points I was going to read. I think it's 30% quicker than in situ concrete structure. And obviously the tooling on site is much easier. Another point to make is they can start roughing in services as soon as the structure's up, which means everything goes a bit faster. Next slide. Thermal performance, these are some of the columns and beams sitting on site. You can see how massive that timber is. So timber's natural insulating properties means it offers much better thermal performance than concrete, which counterintuitively doesn't perform well thermally. Next slide. Reduced structural weight, so timber construction weighs a lot less than concrete or steel. Foundations can be reduced in size, and spans, in particular this building, sitting over very large spans because there's a driveway into a loading dock below. There's just, the building is not as heavy basically as a concrete building. It also makes timber well suited for retrofitting or building over existing structures. Next slide, Hazel. There's a couple of technical points here. So waterproofing, CLT slabs are flat, so waterproofing is difficult. There's a couple of drawings, this slide and the next slide, really just there to show you the lengths we went to get this to work in terms of waterproofing. And also the next slide's about fire protection. So any building with timber is interrogated for fire performance really heavily, and you need to prove that it will perform. So rest assured that this building has been interrogated to within an inch of its life in terms of its fire performance. Next slide, Hazel. And this is just a render. We don't have any beautiful photographs of the interior due to lockdown restrictions, but this is a render of the ground floor interior space, just showing what that timber looks like when you're inside, as well as the exposed surfaces through there. And the experience you'll have in that space if you were to walk in next week or in 2 weeks when lockdown lifted, it's not dissimilar to what we're seeing in this render.
And it's worth noting also that on the facade, as you would have seen in the installation photograph that Alastair was talking to, we use the beams at the edge of the perimeter of the building as the spandrel. So we were really wanting to highlight what was going on inside and really expose the structure as part of the way that you read the building. So even though it is highly reflective on a very overcast day, in some of the photos you would have seen, when you are up close to it, the timber is very visible through the facade, which is actually quite a lovely moment to sort of just contemplate what that actually is, because it is one of the few timber frame structured buildings in Melbourne so far. Flipping to some of the brickwork. So we're very, very big fans of using authentic and almost raw materiality, and not using anything too polished beyond what we needed to do on where we've got the glass facades. So we're looking at the context and what that means. We're very cognizant of what Carlton offers as not just part of the university, but the suburb itself. And I guess the scale of some of the streetscapes, and looking at how we actually draw that into a design proposition that you can experience when we're walking down the street, so that the scale of the building is further reduced when you are up close and engaging with it. So abstracting what we understand about that Carlton skyline, sort of 3 to 4 stories at most, which is what we transposed into our podium condition. And we started to carve into that. And the abstraction of that turned into a lovely sort of play on the brickwork and the way that we punched the openings in through, particularly Grattan Street, but also Swanson Street. When we started to orchestrate what we understood needed to be quite grand gestures, and I mentioned the splits in the big building fabric previously to signify the entrances, the Science Gallery being one of those. We did a lot of investigations around how to signify this particular opening, and the team we modelled each and every one of these bricks. We looked at the pixelation patterning. We understood how when you turn a red brick on its end, when it's a blue red brick, it doesn't have the same colour. We did a lot of experimentation, building prototypes out in the brickyard and making sure that we gave the brickies as much information, including 3D printed models and a series of very in-depth and detailed drawings so that they could build what we had built in the computer. And this being on Swanson Street, we were able to use some of the university grey bricks in through this one, as this is the site that's facing the university. Very rare that they're allowed to be used off campus, so we were very careful with them. And the beautiful portal that actually frames the entrance space of the maker and creator space, and just some detailed views of that one. So we wanted to also share with you a bit of the making of these portals. It is quite complex and it's a very bespoke solution. So with that amazing collaborative, I've got to say, it was worked through quite a few times in order for us to understand how to span these big portal openings and to get the real bricks all the way through the podium and across into those portals. So you would have seen that they're real cast bricks. They're actually cut and had Rio put in each and every one. As if we didn't make that more as hard as we could for ourselves, we then, with the science gallery and with Arup invented this thing that we called the digital brickwork. A beautiful product that we had floating around the office with the glass bricks, and I really wanted to use them. So along with Arup on a Friday evening in our studio, we came up with a way of bringing to life a digital solution to put our iPhones behind the screens, to be honest. And we then prototyped up how that could actually work en masse, and did a lot of research into how to put that into the Science Gallery entrance portal. And it worked a treat. It's just won a digital media architecture award, and it is really fascinating. There's a lot of complex technology that's gone into it. Our photographers' grandkids love it, and it really is spectacular. It's something completely unexpected, and it's curated as well as part of the Science Gallery. So when there's something going on inside, there's an artist who is part of the exhibition, and each and every one gets to experience it on the street. So this is going 24/7, I believe, and it's really fun. And another short clip for you, so you can see it in action. And I'd encourage you to, if you can, within your 5 kilometre radius, take a walk past. It really is quite spectacular. Onto the facades of the main building. And you would have seen in the ESD list of credits and ambitions that we had that 10% energy that we had to generate on site, and as through renewables. And one of the strategies to try and reduce the load of the overall building and the demand was really to ask our facades to do some self-shading. And we devised a series of ways of doing that. We ended up with a beautiful solution that actually is incredibly tailored to each and every one of the orientations of the facade and the workplaces in behind it. So we have a series of sun shading hoods, and the node points on each and every one of these is quite different. And part of that is also that we triangulated, and you may not be able to quite pick it, but you'll see the ones with the shadows, the hoods, and the ones that have what look like a shadow, but not actually a shadow. They're actually prismatic. So we created three-dimensional curtain walling system, and you can see each and every one of those panels is offset, and the way that actually serves to protect and keep a lot of the sun load off of the building. It helps us to achieve some of those ESD ambitions. And as I said, that is changeable all the way around the facade. So on the southeastern, we're getting a little bit of morning sun. So that's why the eastern face there has some of the sun shading hoods, and why you would have seen on the southwestern in the late afternoon, that also cops quite a bit of sun through here. and then the views back out to the city remain relatively unencumbered, which is why there's less of them facing south. The coloration for the hoods, so on the outside they're all the same colour. On the inside they replicate the colour of the prisms, and that's a colour back glass, and it changes every 2 levels up the building through here. From the inside it's actually quite spectacular. Alastair, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit more about how the team actually achieved some of this?
Sure. So it is pretty scientific. We worked with Arup, who were the ESD engineers on the project, to basically tune the facade to respond to solar patterns, I suppose, as well as take into account self-shading from other buildings around. So the facade is responsive to its environment, and it was worked through this with a detailed energy model with Arup. So we could basically add and delete hoods and the prismatic panels that Hazel was talking about to micro adjust the responsiveness of the building, and also to micro adjust in response to budget and other parameters. So it is a pretty highly tuned facade, and its responsive appearance is I guess a bonus. So it's kind of it sort of advertises what it does. We also adjusted those node points a lot to, you can sort of see in the top right hand diagram there, the node point moves around a bit. We did a lot of analysis and tests of moving that node point in and out to see what kind of performance we get and what kind of visual impact we get externally and internally.
And we also spent a bit of time modelling what this would actually look like. So hand-built models down on the left and 3D printed model on the right there. And again, just working through with Arup and the team to make sure that that was a solution that obviously was applicable to be procured overseas, that we could go and inspect and make sure that the quality was as it needed to be, and all of this prototyping and 3-dimensional modelling for us made it very easy for us to converse with the contractors in swapping models, essentially. Made the shop drawing process a little bit easier. And some of the reflections and shadows are really quite spectacular. The 3-dimensionality as you walk around the building as well, and you can start to just sneak in some of the coloration on the inside of the hoods there as it changes. The ripple effect, again, it changes every second of the day, and Trevor Main, our photographer, had a great deal of fun capturing this. These are just a few of what really amount to hundreds.
It's a pretty nuanced and sublime facade, even if we do say so ourselves. We got some fantastic comments and compliments from the builders on site. And you know, when the builder tells you that's beautiful, it must really be beautiful.
So that really brings us to a little bit of a conclusion in terms of us sharing with you some of the behind the scenes. And yeah, Tim, do you want to jump in and we'll maybe take some of the questions?
Yeah, unbelievable. Thank you so much, Alastair and Hazel, for that terrific presentation. Look, I've worked there. I'm there every day, and I just learned so much, and it's going to make me even more grateful to be walking in there each time. So thank you so much for this. It's fantastic. It's really, really fascinating. So we do have a few questions. We'll jump into these for about 10 minutes. And so if anybody else on this call has any more questions, feel free to put them in and we'll get to them. I'll just start from the top. So this is a question from Andrea. It's about the CLT building, and the question relates to how sustainable is the wood that's grown and sourced? Are you able to give a little bit more information on that? Alastair, you made reference to the fact that there's not the industry in Australia yet, but perhaps you could talk to that?
It's pretty close. Yeah, it's a really good question, Andrea. So I don't know if the timber we procured was sustainably grown. I would hope that it was. It's sourced from Stora Enso and Hess in Germany. plantation hardwoods, but I don't know whether it's FSC certified or not. There are a couple of mass timber manufacturers starting up in Australia and New Zealand who've been around for a few years now, who we would hope to source our next project with. And we would always intend that it would be sustainably grown and FSC certified timber. But for this one, I'd have to find out and make sure I can get an answer out there publicly, because I think it's a really great question.
Great. And look, as I see a couple of people going about their daily things, I'm going to pop a poll up for everybody as well to give a bit of feedback about this. So you no such thing as a free lunch. So I'm going to launch that and put that over there, and we'll keep going through the questions. So Sri has a couple of interesting questions, actually. I'm going to try and assess what he's suggesting here, but he's talking about perhaps a reference that you made, Hazel, to the warmth of the building. Did you want to describe that of the superfloor and what you mean by that, and how those vibes that you were talking about are sort of created through, I suppose, the materiality?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. And look, I mentioned that authenticity and the materiality that we were really wanting to bring through, not just externally, but we wanted to bring that through into the interior as well. So as much as we could, within practical realms, we used what was outside inside. So there is brickwork outside. We brought a lot of the timber in through, particularly into the superfloor and up through the beautiful foyer space of the entrance. And there's a beautiful stair in through there. We don't quite have the photos yet. They're coming, so we'd encourage you again just to go and have a look. But there's raw steel up through there with again with timber and concrete. We've got bluestone on the floor. So a lot of it was about that design intent to make sure that whatever you saw throughout the building, you could almost like create it experience it very democratically in a way that the outside is just as important as the inside and vice versa. But there's different ways that we used each and every one of those materials to sort of create either an internal or an external experience. So the warmth, we think, comes out of that, and what we're really looking forward to is how those materials age and how they patina and how they weather. And that's something I'm particularly interested in as an architect.
Brilliant. And just a follow-up sort of comment from Sri, and I have a go at answering this, Sri, actually. He's talking about, wonderful presentation materials. Have you thought about doing this in AR or 2.5? Now, actually, Sri, there's a couple of elements that we could say. There was a terrific group that came out of MAP, Melbourne Accelerator Program, that made some terrific applications that imagined a lot of this material in 2.5D or even augmented reality. And that's a group called... Heath's going to have to jump here. Their name has escaped me, Phil. Maybe you. Foria, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. So look, we've got those on site. So come and have a look at those, Sri, as well. And in fact, there's a number of labs in the engineering faculty that are a key member of the building that are working on a number of these things. Digital twin is a common term that's being used in the industry. Did your company have anything to do with any of that work, Hazel and Alastair?
Yeah, look, we certainly met Foria very early on in the piece, and when the competition was announced and the design was kind of launched by Julie Wells and the team, and it was all kind of out there in the public realm, they did produce, I think, a number of them, but we certainly saw a couple of their demonstrations as part of that MAP, and knowing that they've been along for the whole journey. So we have slightly less sophisticated VR technology within our studio, but we certainly did resolve a lot of the design in that manner, putting on the goggles and standing there and understanding if, the laneway was wide enough, or, the soffit was tall enough, or how big did the canopy need to be. So a lot of that stuff helps us to make design decisions when it is is better to experience it because you can see this is quite a complex project. So a lot of it coming together needed a software like that to facilitate some of those decisions, yeah, as well as being fun.
Yeah.
It's also worth adding, Tim and Hazel, that there was a pretty significant BIM component to the project, so building information modelling. So we worked through that process as we designed, and we and the other consultant teams handed over a very complex and complete BIM model. So there is a BIM model that lives in the world now that is a representation of this building, and it was kind of above and beyond what we would typically do for many projects. We didn't talk about it in the presentation, but it was a pretty serious bit of work that we had to do to get that.
Brilliant. And Phil, look, there might be a question for you here. We didn't touch on it significantly, but it was referenced a number of times. That the student accommodation building, that's pretty unique as well for this building. So the question's about, you know, we're having less and less international students. What's the strategy to deal with this terrific new building that we have, and who's it for, and what's it about?
Cool, you're right. Absolutely unique, a fantastic proposition. It was 523 postgraduate places primarily. So an astonishing, I think, correct me, Hazel, but it's a first in the state, I think, for a completely dedicated postgraduate offering. When I say that there wasn't, and it was referenced earlier, it's not only student accommodation in terms of postgrad and postdoc researchers too, as well as visiting and residential academics. So there is a sort of a conglomeration of communities that would be accessing that. It's not open yet, and we're anticipating that it's going to open in 2022. Obviously, there's a lot of work going on with the provost and the academic recruitment teams as to what's going to happen with the purely international student space, but this is primarily a postgrad space, not necessarily an international postgrad space as well.
Brilliant. We've got a few more in a few minutes, so we'll just keep going through them. Seeing it's such a green building, were there any accountabilities around the management, disposal and recycling of materials by the builders? It's a pretty detailed question, but do you have any reference to any of that, Hazel or Alastair?
It's a good question.
I
don't know if there is anything as part of Green Star about there is about procurement and about tracking everything as you procure it, right? So proving they're building what we've asked them to build. In terms of disposal and recycling, there isn't as part of Green Star, and there wasn't as part of this project. There may have been as part of the Brickwork demolition, Hazel. I'm not sure. That might have been the only component that was.
Yeah, we reclaimed, I think, about 22,000 of the bricks from the hospital, and we put them in the paving, as you would have seen. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Al, we should probably do a little bit more questioning of that approach from Lendlease. Yeah,
I think as Green Star develops, there will be more requests for recycling and reuse of material as part of Green Star.
Fantastic. And I'm going to jump around a little bit here because I can see some interesting ones. And these will be the quick question round. So, in fact, Peter Sabon, who's one of our professors at the Precinct, has asked a question that I've heard quite a lot, actually, the last 3 months I've been there, is a decision around the ceilings and not to have ceilings is how he phrased it. I'm not sure whether you'd phrase it like that, but it is certainly a bare ceiling sort of aesthetic. What's the thinking around that?
Yeah, that was quite deliberate, and again, it was all about just that authenticity and being able to see all the way through the space. We often find that leaving the ceiling out makes the space feel higher and a little bit more generous. It is often a little bit more work for us because we have to coordinate everything with the services engineers to make it look decent. And it was definitely about that robustness and that industrial sort of approach and aesthetic, so that because we knew that the superfloor in itself was and is, it's meant to have a bit of grit to it. It's going to be used each and every day when we all get back there. And in ways that, it could be from a very polished presentation by an industry professional, but it could also be somebody bringing in a robot and demonstrating how to make a new brick wall out of concrete. And so there's sort of realms within which this whole space operates, and we didn't want to make it look too finished. So in that respect, we really went with the open ceiling and the pipework and everything on display. So, yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. All right, so we'll just give time for two more really quickly. First of all, if you're not reading it, there's some very positive feedback, Hazel and Alastair, coming through in these questions. They're using the questions as comments, which is fine, Q&A style, saying thank you very much for a terrific presentation. There's a question about Innovation Week, and I can't ignore this and answer this not publicly. So this is a big event that we've got coming up in 3 weeks' time, a bit similar to Knowledge Week, actually. That's all. You can go and visit that now, folks, at innovationweek.melbconnect.com.au. The question's about the lockdown restrictions. Thanks, George. Good question. We're anticipating that all of the events will be hybrid models, so reduced capacity, which we're anticipating after COVID, and we'll be creating interactive online events as well. If we need to go full sort of virtual, we have that capacity. So thanks for that question. And then the final question I'll put to the panel, which is an interesting one as well, and perhaps one that we're still yet to fully deal with at the precinct, is with so many activities happening on the superfloor, how did you consider noise? And do you consider noise may be an issue?
Yes and no. I think there's probably two ways to look at that. And look, each and every one of the ceilings has an acoustic treatment. So there's a bat that's actually nailed to the underside of the soffit, and you would have seen that that's in the CLT building as well. So that helps to dampen the noise a little bit, but the hard surfaces that you're walking through the superfloor space, part of it was so it didn't feel too quiet, that there was a sense of noise and bustle and, things happening. And certainly when you're walking up the stairs, because it is all made of steel and timber, it's a little bit noisy, but that was all quite deliberately part of it. We quite like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I should add also to Hazel's answer that we worked with the Arab acoustics throughout all the spaces, and every acoustics in every space was considered. There is acoustic insulation in that voice space, so there's just enough, I suppose. So it was pretty well thought out by us and Arab in the level of noise and how that kind of worked in every space. So there's quieter spaces and noisier spaces designed to have a kind of spectrum across the floor.
Yeah.
And we've found in practice that works very effectively. We've had the superfloor activated for Melbourne Knowledge Week with 400 people having a very good time. And right adjacent to that in the forum space, beautifully acoustically isolated, 30 executives doing a planning workshop simultaneously. So yeah, works very well.
Good to hear, Phil.
That's great to hear, Phil. Great.
Fantastic. Well, look, we might leave it there, folks. I'll say one more thank you, and I'll hand it over to Phil to wrap up. But what a terrific event! Let's do it again when we can get into the precinct. But as Hazel said, you're welcome to come down. The laneways are public space. The superfloor, we'd love to meet you, and we'd love to invite you to some of our events. So we hope to see you there soon. And I'll hand over to Phil to wrap us up today.
Look, I've got to say a big thank you to Alastair and Hazel for a phenomenal presentation. And I echo Tim's comments. We live in the place. It's our workplace. It's our work home. And you've helped expose some of the anatomy of that. And it's fascinating. It shows the degree of care and thought, consultation and execution. It's really quite superb. And we live it on a daily basis. I'd like to extend that invite to the whole audience and your friends. Come and check it out too. It's public accessible. It is a city and state asset as well as the universities and land leases. This is an absolute asset for the city. It's all in the name, come and connect. Thank you.
All right. With that, everybody, we'll leave it there. Have a great weekend, and we hope to see you on the site soon. All the best.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.